What's going on, everybody? We're doing off topic, and as we do a lot of the time, we have a guest, or in this case, two. Now, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Darren, is this the first time we've had two guests?
I think so.
And you can hear his excitement.
Yes, it is.
We have another duo. So this is sort of like a duo versus a duo, and we've got our friends Iconic Al, who's been on my channel once before as a short-winded guest, and then his counterpart in their brothers duo, Mr. Brian, the High Pop Professor, who is a fellow teacher. Welcome to you.
Well, thank you, sir.
So we're excited to talk to you guys, and we want to pick your brains. And I can genuinely say that when you guys do your collaboration, it's some of my favorite YouTube that I watch each month. I genuinely look forward to it. I genuinely enjoy it. And when I see that one drops, I'm like, oh, sweet. And I watch it within 24 hours every time.
That means a lot. Coming from you, a content creator that I and Brian both respect, it's kind of funny to hear that people actually enjoy hearing us, rant about things, banter back and forth about collecting, but people seem to enjoy them. And I'm just happy that we can hit the record button and other people do enjoy watching what we say. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. I will say that the funny thing here is that even if we didn't have a YouTube channel, we would still probably have these conversations anyway. Yeah. And so we figured we might as well just hit the record button and see what happens. And so I'm really glad, we're honored that people love it. People like to watch it. But yeah, so thank you. But the feeling is mutual. We love watching your stuff too. So
Darren, does that sound familiar to you, that they just like talking and then they record it and whoever watches?
Yeah, because Greg and I recently recorded our just the two of us video, and like we got done, and that's exactly what we said was, if we could do this literally every day, just chat, and then we'll record it, and 3 or 4 people will be like, sweet, I'm gonna watch the whole thing.
Yeah, it's a fun hang regardless.
Now, let me just throw this out before we get in there too far, and I'll try to say it a couple of times. But if you've not yet subscribed to Iconic Al or the High Pop Professor, highly recommend. I genuinely, like I just said, I don't just like your collaborations. I watch all of your guys' stuff. And one of the things I love about both of your channels and your combo videos is that you guys are very philosophical, and you guys are very metaphoric in the way that you approach things. And to me, what that does is it keeps things very broad, and it keeps things very relatable. So like, I look at Brian, the way that you collect, the High Pop Professor collects very differently than I do, but you're one of the guys who could collect very differently than me, but I still watch all of your stuff. Like, I watch all of your stuff. There aren't a lot of people. I watch all of their stuff. I watch all of yours. And I want to start with you. And on one of your brothers duo episodes, you talked about how your collection is like a bonsai tree. And that really is one of the first things that made me go, I need to have these guys on. Tell us what that whole metaphor of your collection being like a bonsai tree, tell us what that's all about.
Sure. Well, I mean, it seemed like a really good metaphor to use for a lot of reasons. It just works in almost every way. You can have these things that a collection can span, an entire lifetime. And, bonsai trees can be very, very old, as we were just discussing before we hit the record button. It can be hundreds of years old. And these kind of the project of growing and maintaining a bonsai tree, it requires, care and attention and love and, careful manicuring, pruning, watering, shaping, growing, trimming. And that's curation. I mean, that's basically what we're doing with our collections in a nutshell. No two bonsai trees will look identical, but if you have one that you shape to your liking, the way that pleases your eye, that's the goal. That's what we're trying to do with our collections. We're trying to shape our collections, manicure our collections, prune our collections, trim them, shape them, form them, mold them, grow them, everything. And so it seems like a good metaphor. So I went with it.
Now,
I like it.
Al, you started your channel before Brian started his channel, but you guys are obviously brothers. But you also collect fairly differently.
Yeah.
To people who aren't familiar yet with your guys' channels, tell us a little bit about your collection and tell us how. Before we talk about how you prune your collection and how you shape your collection, how would you describe your collection to someone who's not familiar with it?
Real quick for everybody watching, Greg will put the links to their channels below. So if you want to just click those and check them out, if you haven't yet. Sorry.
Thanks, Darren.
Sure.
Yeah, I think Brian and I are two examples of a horizontal collector versus a vertical collector. I mean, Brian has more of a vertical collecting philosophy in that he collects Greg Maddux and a few select other vertical categories or verticals, if you want to call them, and he goes really deep with some of those verticals. And I collect more horizontally. So I identified a group of subjects. Marshall Fogel describes this in a way that he sort of recommends, or how he's built out his collection as a horizontal collector. And I sort of take a lot of, I guess, inspiration from Marshall Fogel. And identifying your subjects is something that he really says is one of the most important things you can do as a collector when you start out. Identify the subjects that you want to collect. And so that was a big part of me forming my top 100 list, kind of a merit-based curation. And we all have different ways of assigning merit, but basically from identifying numbers of players, how iconic they are, how meaningful they are in the hobby, how historically relevant they are, I was able to sort of come to my own merit-based ranking of my top 100 players, which is then the subjects that I choose to collect in a horizontal fashion, sort of across that horizontal list of subjects. So I'm more horizontal, Brian is more vertical, but we both care deeply about what we're doing, and there's no right way, there's no wrong way.
No.
It's just
yeah. Now, Darren, you and Al actually get to hang out from time to time, and you've actually seen him walk through card shows and see him do his thing. I got to spend a little bit of time with Al at the National, and right after he made a big purchase, he had just earlier in the day, I think, bought his Cy Young autograph. And so how would you say that you collect similarly to Al, or would you say that your method of collecting is different than Al? Because I think you guys are obviously more similar in how you collect than you and the professor.
I think Al and I do collect fairly similarly, and if you watch Greg and my last off topic, where it was just the two of us, I talked a little bit about how I'm changing a little bit of how I'm collecting, and it actually will become slightly more similar to Al, where I'm looking at some autographs as well. Jake does the Hall of Fame autograph list, and he sent it to me just so I could add some autographs to it, just because I track some of them. And then I was looking through because he ranks everybody in the Hall of Fame 1 to 11 on difficulty of getting the autograph. And there were a few people where I was like, wait, that person's like a 7. I figured they'd be like an 11. And now I'm like, wow, I could pick up some of these like really cool, super early, not even players, but like, founders of the game kind of people. And I didn't even realize their autographs were accessible at all. And it's like, wow, I didn't look, and now I know. So that kind of had me start thinking about possibly start getting into picking up some autographs as well. And I know Al's big he has an incredible autograph collection, vintage autograph collection, Hall of Fame, some of the greatest players of all time.
Now I'm going to go back to you, Al, and then I want to ask something to Brian. You said you first identify the subjects, and that's an important thing to do. and that Marshall Fogel is the person who you've also heard talk about. Marshall Fogel, obviously, also from the same area as you guys, and has an incredible collection, maybe the best in the world, if not one of the top handful. And when you say subjects, are you only talking about players and athletes and people, or are you also potentially talking about sets and eras? Like, define what subjects could be. When you say identify the subjects you want to collect, are we just talking players?
Yes. So I consider the subjects to be the players, and then within the subjects, once you identify those, then you can start to stratify out into what sets do I want to cover. What then within those subjects can I get to all the iconic sets or the meaningful sets within the history of the hobby within those 100 subjects. And then that's sort of a secondary goal of mine as a type collector, trying to get all of the important sets represented within those top 100 players. So yeah, subjects are the players, and then you sort of stratify from there and try to get all the sets that you want to represent within those top 100. So I'm kind of doing both at the same time.
And their autographs.
And the autographs, yeah.
And their autographs. Now, Brian, there have been a few times where you've been showing cards on your channel, because I don't know anything about 90s refractors. Everything that I know about 90s refractors, I would say I learned from you and maybe some from Adam's Splendid Sports. And so what I do, there have been several times I hit pause and you'll show a card. I'm like, dude, that's a cool looking card. I hit pause and I'll write down what the set is. And then I go to eBay and I start looking at different players and what those cost. And some of them really surprise me. I'm like, that's all that costs? Like, that's a really cool looking card. And in a 9, that card's only $35. Like, that's crazy. Some of them are more expensive than I thought. But when you were talking about the bonsai tree and shaping your collection, and sometimes you have to, snip off branches, how do you know, for you or anybody listening, how does somebody know when it's time to cut off a branch so that there's room for the rest of the tree to take a new direction? Because I think there are times, and Darren and I were talking about this recently, that you sit there and you're like, you feel married to something and you go, well, this doesn't really fit my collection anymore, but it's nice. So should I just sell it to go into this other direction? Like, what are sort of like the cues, in your opinion, that branch of your collection needs to be cut?
It's a great question. I think a lot of us as collectors, we're pretty good at acquiring things because there's so many cool things out there. There's no shortage of awesome looking things. And it's like, wow, that looks awesome. I want to get this. I want to get that. But yeah, when it comes to trimming, I think that's probably an area that a lot of people either don't really consider or think about much. And for me, I have a couple of things, a couple of ways I could sort of take this. So what I'm trying to sort of, the first thing for me comes down to focus. And I think that focusing and identifying your, in Iconic Al's case, subjects or targets is a great first place to begin. For me, when I was getting back in, so I took I collected all growing up, stopped around the year 2000 or so, and really dove back in post-COVID and really got back into it. And I was a Maddox collector even in the 90s, growing up. And so I still have a large chunk of what I have, a big gigantic binder right behind me there is all Greg Maddox cards from when I was growing up. And so I think, choosing the focus and deciding where your highest priorities are is where you want to spend all your sort of your time, your energy, your attention, your resources. And so, deciding on that. And so if you have a couple different PCs, maybe it's just that like you want to reallocate some of your resources to align more properly with where you want to be focused. And so part of how I choose to do that, I took a lot of cards with me to the National last year. And I ended up selling quite a bit. In fact, I did way more selling than buying. And the way I decided sort of what to bring with me and what to take with me is that, number one, I sort of look at it, and I almost take the KonMari approach of, you know, the life-changing magic of tidying up, where does the card, does it spark joy? It's like, I want the cards that I acquire to sort of give me that giddy feeling inside, like, oh my God, you get like really excited when you acquire something, or you see something, or you pick it up and you hold it. And it doesn't have to be a high dollar card that sparks that kind of joy. You know, I find myself picking up some cards, like, here's a really cool card from 1990 Donruss, but it's blue. It's like, what? Wait a minute, that's supposed to be a red card. What is this? And it's like, whoa, that's so cool. It's like a $1 card, but it sparks joy. It gets me all excited inside. And so that's the kind of card I'm going to put on my desk, you know, at work, because, well, it's only $1, but look how cool it is. And so it sparks joy. So I would think if there are cards that don't do that, or maybe they did at one point, but maybe at this time it's like, well, you know, the shine has faded, and, you know, you're not feeling, you're quite, a little more lukewarm on it than you maybe had been. Well, it's time to maybe move along and move into something that does spark that joy, that really gets you excited and, you know, just you know, ramped up about it. So I think that's one thing. The second thing I would consider too is, even for things that I would still consider part of my PCs, I will move things along either if I feel like it's something that is reacquirable down the line. I will consider doing that to target something that is not easily reacquirable down the line. So we're looking at like scarcity. So for example, so I sold a Ricky Henderson rookie card that I had picked up a couple of years ago, but when I got it in hand, it was one of those where it looked way better in the picture than when I actually got it in hand. And I'm not sure if they like touched up the image, you know, clarity or the brightness to make it look like it popped more, but I just wasn't super happy with it. And so I was going to upgrade it anyway. And so I figured, okay, well, let's go ahead and move that along, and again, build up some funds and target something. And that's something that I can reacquire anytime down the line. It's one of the struggles I have. I'd love to eventually get like an 84 Fleer Update Clemens. I'd love to get that card, which I know is a special card for you, Greg. But I have a hard time actually pulling the trigger on something like that, because somewhere in the back of my mind, I know it's always going to be there. It's always going to be available. It's not a difficult card to find in almost any grade tier condition, graded, ungraded, whatever you want. And so I have a hard time doing that, when that means, again, the opportunity cost over, I could be missing out on something that pops up that is actually quite scarce and wouldn't be easy to reacquire sometime down the line. So those are all the kinds of considerations I think about when I'm deciding what to trim and what to target.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I want to go back over to Al for a second, because based on what he just said, and then based on something I've heard you say, it makes me wonder something for you. So he just said, you know, sometimes there's something that you have in your collection, and then you maybe just don't get that excited feeling, and you kind of get lukewarm about it. And I've heard you say, Al, and correct me if the percentage is not correct, but you've said something close to, yeah, I feel like my collection is about 97% complete. And it may have been 96, it may have been 95, but something like that. It's most of what you want in your collection, you have in place. When you said that, I was like, how does he know? How does he know that it's 97% complete? Because what if he just gets lukewarm on some of the things that are in there? What if your Aaron card, now or the Aaron autograph that you have, is, you go, you know, I really wish it was actually on a card instead of on this photo or on this ball or something, because I'm kind of lukewarm on that now. How are you so certain that you're 97% complete, when it's possible that we all just get lukewarm to stuff?
Yeah, I'm always open to upgrading, or that's part of the curation process. But, you know, what is currently in my collection now, it's stuck there. Most of it is stuck there for a reason. So the reason it's there is because it has stood the test of decades. A lot of it, a lot of these things I've had for decades. And so, you know, I bought my Ty Cobb autograph back in college in 2001. So I've had that for 24 years. And I'm not going to need another Ty Cobb autograph. I mean, I love the thing. I just, if it's stuck with me this long, then I obviously like it enough to have kept it for as long as I've had it. And yeah, would I be open to upgrading here and there? Like there was a Roy Campanella card that I got kind of lukewarm on. I had a 54 Bowman Campanella, and I liked it. I liked it more when I got it, and then I had it for 20 years, and then I fell in love with the 51 Bowman Campanella. That image of him ripping off his mask and looking up, just one of the most beautiful catching images in the hobby. And so I sort of I didn't fall out of love with the 54 Bowman as much as I fell in love with the 51 Bowman. So I moved along my 54 Bowman, sold that for, whatever it was worth, and then turned my efforts to getting that double take of the 51 Bowman Campy and the 52 Wheaties Campy, which are matching images. So for me, it just made my eye very much more happy than just the standard portrait shot of 54 Bowman. So there's little examples like that yes, I may pivot a little bit within a player like Roy Campanella, which was relatively easy to do. It wasn't an overly expensive thing to do. But when I look at that pair of the Campanellas, it just makes me so happy. Much more so than that other Campy that I sold. So yeah, there's always little tweaks and upgrades happening. But yeah, in terms of volume, I might be 96% complete, but certainly not by value. So that's where I would correct you there. And that, still needing a Babe Ruth and a Lou Gehrig autograph. I mean, there's still quite a bit of value there that I'm going to need to put out at some point in order to complete my collection. But in terms of mass, it's maybe 96% complete. Yeah.
Now, let me just throw in again, we got Iconic Al, subscribe to Iconic Al. We got Brian, the High Pop Professor, subscribe to him. And then this guy, Darren, right there next to me. If you want to subscribe, probably subscribe to him if you know me. I want you guys to know something. If it looks like I'm looking down and you're seeing the top of my head, I am listening intently. I'm just scribbling lots of notes. So just don't think that I'm not listening. I am planning what I'm going to ask next as you're answering. And something just struck me across my face as I was listening to you answer that just now, Al. And that's the four of us have something in common that I think a lot of collectors in the hobby don't have in common. And that's all of us have a dad who collected cards as an adult.
Yeah.
Not just a dad who collected when they were a kid and then we did it and they kind of said, but as an adult, our dads all collected.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting too, because Brian and Al, your dad was, correct me if I'm wrong, he was a player collector and he was a Barry Bonds super collector. And Darren, your dad collected a lot of Yankees, but he really player collected Willie Keeler.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's interesting that we all have that in common. So I'm curious, like, Darren, when you're going through your collection and you're collecting now, how has that how is watching your dad as an adult collect? What are the fingerprints in your collection that you think probably stem from what you observed from your dad?
Probably two key things. One is like the eye appeal of my cards. He's really big on the eye appeal of cards. Like I've seen him looking at like a very, very rare card and he's like, I'm not going to buy this one. There's this little thing wrong with it. And I'm like, you're not going to find another one for 2 years. And he's like, all right, so in 2 years, when I do, I'll get that one. So eye appeal, I'm not quite to that extent, but yes, eye appeal. And then I think just kind of in general, like early pre-war stuff, right? He obviously, like you said, he collected Keeler, so he collected cards from the late 1800s to like the early 1900s, and I definitely enjoy picking those up. I like that. Those are the only cards that I collect that are like commons. I don't have any common cards from any set really after the T206 set, but I do have a bunch of common cards from T206, from N172s, I've got common cards from, all kinds of just beautiful 1800s sets. And I think that's something that I kind of got from him too, is just, appreciating the beauty and the artwork of those early cards.
And your dad also did a lot of memorabilia, which your brother Dean kind of does more than you.
Yeah.
Now, Al and Brian, are you your only two siblings, or do you have other siblings?
Yep, just us.
So Darren has a brother, I have a brother, and you two are two brothers. So that's also kind of interesting that you kind of have had growing up, and now to a certain extent you have kind of a collecting buddy with your brother, and then your dad is knowledgeable of the topic. Now, when I look at your guys' dad, Brian, it seems like I see more fingerprints of how your dad collected in your collecting, being more of a modern, rare, refractor, insert type card guy. Would you agree with that?
100%. Yeah. He was a Barry Bonds player collector, super collector. And so watching him, all through the 90s and the 2000s, it was a heck of a role model to have, because you saw how he would approach methodically. We would attend shows together. It was a blast doing that. He would have physically printed out a want list of top cards he was looking for at that time. Now, of course, at the time that was the ultra modern stuff. This was the stuff that was coming out in that year. And so even if they were rare inserts, there may not have been the internet and eBay, in 94, 95, but we were going to shows and we were attending them. And of course they were opening the product right then. And so that, we were ultra modern collectors during that time period. Right. And so in my collection today, I'm also a player collector, Maddox player collector. But there are some things that I do a little bit differently than the way he did things. He would always sort of keep a running count, a total of how many different, Barry Bonds cards he had. And he was going for quantity. I mean, quality as well. I mean, that included it because he was going for all the high end stuff too. But I decided, right from when I was getting back in, that I wasn't really interested in quantity. I'm not trying to hit a number. I'm not trying to be a hoarder. I don't want, that to take over the entire house. I just wanted to specifically focus and target very specific runs or key types of cards that either hit my nostalgic, senses or appealed to my tendency for liking shiny things like the refractor runs. And so that's what I targeted. I targeted refractor runs. I wanted the finest refractors, the Bowman's best refractors, Topps Chrome refractors, and Bowman Chrome refractors, pretty much for all of Maddox's playing days as a Brave. And so those were some of my first runs I put together, along with some of the other ones, the Topps Tiffany runs, things like that. And those were some of the first projects that I had sort of assigned myself when getting back in. And I think that's something that's it's fun to sort of put some guidelines, some boundaries on it, because if you don't put some of those guidelines and boundaries on yourself, and you don't really sharpen your focus, it's so easy to get lost in going every which way with your collection. So I do think that in having a targeted list, I might not have a physical want list that I carry around with me when I attend the Philly shows around me, but in the same way, I do have very specific targeted, next what I'm looking to pick up. I have, in my brain a couple that I'm looking for specifically. And so the challenge for me is maintaining that patience and focus and waiting around and saving up and doing the trimming and selling ahead of time so that when they come up, I'll be in a position to be able to attack them, pounce on them, hit the buy it now or throw a snipe in the last second at an auction, and acquire those.
Now, yeah, all that is fantastic and makes sense. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, so your dad is collecting volume and quality of Barry Bonds. You are collecting nostalgic and quality Greg Maddox. And then Al is buying Ty Cobb autographs in college. So how does that happen? how do you have a dad who's collecting modern, a brother who's focused on a modern player, but you've got this thirst for all-time great players from 100 years ago? How does that happen?
Yeah, it's probably, well, we went over how our upbringing was the same, both all having dads that collected and brothers to collect with, but we're different in that our dad didn't. We got our dad into collecting. He wasn't collecting before us, really. I mean, he had a shoebox full of cards when he was a kid, just like everyone his age did back when he was a kid. But then they got thrown away when he went to college, and he's still bitter about that. But and then it was when we became of collecting age. Like I was like 10 years old, buying 90 tops packs, and or yeah, was it 90 tops? 89.
89.
Yeah, 89 was the first year I remember buying packs. And I remember him helping me put those in pages. So I had a binder and he helped me put those in pages. And I think something switched in his collecting brain, like, oh, this is fun, you know? And you could tell then when Brian got into collecting, I was into collecting now. And then something switched where he was watching Pirates games and he was watching Barry Bonds on the field. And something switched in his collecting brain, switched back on, because he's always been a collector of various things. But I think it was the Bonds was the trigger, and then us being of pack pulling buying age when we were young, it got him into the hobby. So it was more us getting him into the hobby, not him fostering our collecting. And my main collecting inspiration was we had a friend named DG, and he had a dad, Dr. Green. And this guy his collection was so amazing. He had autographs of all the all-time greats on baseballs in his living room. And when we would go over to DG's house, he would take us through and we would shake his dad's hand and he would be so happy to show us his collection and show us his Babe Ruth signed baseball and show us his vintage, game used jerseys. He threw me a glove. It was an old looking glove and I caught it and he's like, that's Dizzy Dean's glove. And so, and it was signed by Dizzy Dean. And he's like, you want to put it on? I'm like, no. He's like, go put it on. I was like, this is Dizzy Dean's glove and you're letting me put it on. And it's like, that had a huge impact on me at 12, 13, 14 years old, because it immediately showed me what was possible. If you dedicated yourself to, amassing pieces of all-time greats, really focusing on subjects, very Marshall Fogel-like. And so that was a real world example of a living room that I got to go in quite a few times. A guy that I interacted with, we went to baseball games with him. We talked collecting and talked baseball history. So he was more of an influence on my collecting than our dad was. So he was maybe more my prototype, archetypal. That's what I want my collection to look like someday. So that was just an external influence on me.
Wow, what a great story. Now, I dragged my dad back into collecting when I was a kid, but he was driving me to card shows and I was, I'd get to the card show and I'd run off. And at a card show, it was a big card show, my dad comes walking up with this big grin on his face and he's got a stack of 1960 Topps cards and he goes, yeah, I decided to build the Yankee team set. But what my dad did is when I got my dad back into it by him being around it and he just said, yeah, this looks like fun, I'm going to do it. He went and started collecting what he collected as a kid.
Sure.
Which I think is interesting. Whereas Darren, your dad collected from before when he was a kid and your guys' dad collected after he collected the modern stuff.
That's crazy.
Really, so sort of, because like when my brother and I were little and we collected cards like 87, 88, 89 Topps, 89 Upper Deck. He collected when he was a kid, but he didn't collect yet. When I was in high school, actually I was a freshman in high school or sophomore in high school. And we went to, I lived in the suburb of Denver for high school. And we went to a shop in Denver, Bill's. Bill's.
Still there.
And the first thing he bought was this right here, there, the thing next to my finger.
He's pointing to something on his wall. If you're listening,
right. And we went there, and he bought a Babe Ruth autograph, and that basically got him rolling again. And we had in our basement, we had a pool room, like a billiard room, and he started picking up pieces and hanging them up in there. And so that was like when I was in high school, and then I stopped collecting, and he kind of went all out during that period when I stopped collecting. And then when he had amassed his big collection, he then sold it when he retired because my parents downsized their house. And then basically like a year or two after he sold it, that's when I got back into it. And then since my brother and I are back into it, he's now picking up some stuff too. So it's actually, there weren't until right now, there weren't a lot of times where we collected at the same time.
Interesting. Brian, why do you think your dad, when he got back into it, got into modern instead of stuff from his childhood that he's still bitter was thrown out?
I think he was watching Barry Bonds play and winning MVPs in the early 90s, and I think he was just taken by, he thought it was the best player he'd ever seen, and was inspired to pick up cards of his. And it's funny too, because you consider what the hobby landscape looked like in 1990. How many cards of there existed for a player in a given year, and I mean, it just went completely exponential by year. In 86 he had 4 rookie cards. In 87 he might have had 10 or whatever, 8. And then 88, 89 he maybe had a dozen or 20, various issues. And then by the time you're hitting 93, 94, 95, it's now in the hundreds every single year.
Yeah.
And so by the time the late 90s, now you're getting like 1,000 a year. It's crazy how that worked, because at the time he started, it wasn't that, it didn't seem like that daunting of a possibility, or you could definitely get every one of his cards ever made. And until up till they started to do serial numbered cards, the Donruss Elites came out, numbered to 10,000. It's like, oh my gosh. And of course Barry Bonds is one of those, right? And these were really, really tough to get. People don't really realize, if you weren't collecting in the 90s, number out of 10,000 seems like, well, 10,000, what, but people could open up 10, 20 boxes without ever hitting one, which just speaks to the amount of volume, the crazy overprinting that was happening during that era. So those cards were still tough to get. And so, it was a big deal as these print runs started getting lower and lower and lower. And all of a sudden, to me, at least in 97, is kind of when the hobby was almost ruined. When you had, Flair Showcase comes out with the first 1-of-1s, the first masterpiece cards, between that and, Topps Tech with all of their, 89, 90 different backgrounds and diffractors that are.
That's the year where it became, impossible to be a completist player collector.
They ruined it. It was now no longer possible. If your goal had been to collect every one of his cards ever made, well, dream has just been killed. It's been shattered. And so to this day, I refuse to pick up any Flair Showcase Legacy cards, any Topps Tech. I'm still salty about it. I refuse. They're beautiful cards. I will acknowledge that. But I won't do it. I won't support that.
Now, Brian, one of the things that when you're describing the bonsai tree about, trimming and growth and stuff, had there been recent areas of growth in your collection? Are there new things that you're interested in now that you weren't 2 years ago? Because I know there are some rare Grail type Maddox cards that you've been trying to level up to, and some of them you've gotten this year by leveling up. But what does it look like to add something new to your interest list? I mean, Darren was just talking a minute ago about adding some autograph stuff to his collection. He's talked recently about some other sports besides just baseball. What are some growth areas that you've had recently or are starting to consider?
I was going to say, but I didn't have one out here to show. Well, I guess I have one, but let's see if I got this. Yeah. So You know, I think there are a couple areas that I've decided to grow out a couple branches of my bonsai tree, and I named one of them in my hobby goals for this year video that I put out, and I decided to pick up a couple nice cards of another player, Tony Gwynn. Tony Gwynn was a guy who just speaks to me on a deeper level. He's not what you would call, you know, he's not like top of the hobby as far as Pareto guys. He's not a Griffey or a Jeter or even a Barry Bonds when it comes to, you know, maybe popularity or value in a given set. But he was one of those guys that just has, again, I'm a math nerd, I'm a numbers guy, and you look at some of the numbers involving guys like Greg Maddux, guys like Tony Gwynn. When it comes to Tony Gwynn's strikeouts and lack of them, and it comes to all these just insane numbers that should not exist, that will never exist. You know, hitting 394. Come on, this is one of those things that, you know, he's a special player, he's a special hitter, and I love that he specifically, I think what speaks to me about him and Maddux both is that in an American culture that is obsessed with power and speed and home runs and fastballs. It's like Greg Maddux was known for his changeup. Tony Gwynn, you know, didn't really, you know, he wasn't Mark McGwire. He wasn't launching 550-foot, you know, shots to, you know, to center field. He was putting his head down and he was slapping these singles all over the place and getting on base. He was driving in runs, but he was doing it just, you know, plugging away one hit at a time. And so I have just so much respect for that brand of, you know, where it makes sense that they wouldn't be the most popular guys. But again, I'm looking for iconic cards. I'm looking for iconic firsts. I'm looking for, so I just recently picked up, and it's on my shelf behind me. I'll have to go get it in a second here, but it's, I decided to pick up Tony Gwynn's, the very first ever game jersey cards that were ever created in 97 Upper Deck. And it's a kind of unusual set. It's an insert set that was very, very tough to pull. I mean, it was pretty close to something like 1 in 800 packs or 1 in 1,000 packs, something like that. And they only had Griffey, Tony Gwynn, and Ray Ordonez were the only 3 players in that set. That was it. And I love Ray Ordonez too. His defense was amazing. But Griffey's a little too pricey for what I'm looking at. But Tony Gwynn hits that perfect sweet spot where it's accessible. It was not serial numbered, but very tough to get. The design is so iconic and really takes you right back. And Maddux wasn't in that set. You know, Maddux as a pitcher wasn't in any of these, you know, home run hitter sets, you know, home run, you know, RBI kings and home run kings. You know, as cool as they are, allowing me to collect a couple cards of guys like Barry Bonds and Griffey. I do have some Bonds and Griffey cards in my PC, but by picking up, you know, some Tony Gwynns, allows me to explore and grow that branch of my bonsai tree.
Nice.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny. I was just looking up here. Tony Gwynn, early in his career,
he stole bases.
Yeah,
that's what I was going to say.
He
He
stole
stole bases.
He did.
And people don't know that. And this tells. I mean, so he had in '84 he had 33. In 86, 37. In 87, he had 56 stolen bases, 40 in 1989. And imagine if he stayed that fast, how much better his batting average would have been too. Just a few, beating out a few hits. And the only reason I know that is from RBI Baseball on Nintendo. He was quick. And I'm like, how's this guy quick? And it would have like some of their stats, like the previous year's stats over on the side and the stolen base. And I was just like, this is crazy. Al, how about you? Like, I know you're you seem more focused than just about anybody that I know of what your target is, what you're looking for. What would be an example over the last couple of years of a new branch? Is it a new player who enters the top 100 of the iconic baseball list, like a Shohei or something, or a Mookie, or like who? Tell me why there might be a new branch on your collection.
Like a Judge.
Yeah, Judge. Yeah, could be within the next year. Judge has another MVP caliber season. Then he's probably going to push onto the list. But yeah, that's always constantly evolving. The top 100 list is always going to be evolving and changing, and that's kind of part of the fun for me. That's a reason to watch baseball. You know, it keeps me in the game. You know, basically like the players that I want to watch. We're talking about top 100 all time players, and there's 7 of them currently active in the game today, which is like, wow, that's crazy to think about. There are 7 players currently on the field in major league games that will be among the top 100 to ever play the game. So that's pretty cool. But in terms of growing a new branch, the last branch that I grew was my 90s refractor project, or my innovation era project. And I just started, I think this was somewhat inspired by Brian, kind of rehashing some of these amazing 90s finest refractors and Bowman's best refractors. And I just loved those sets so much growing up. And so I was able to add an example of all the sets that I wanted to add within my top 100, lattice, basically. Mm-hmm. So I chose examples of cards that I really liked the look of. They were generally like top 60 kind of guys. And so I was able to sort of build a binder, a slab binder of mostly these iconic 90s era parallel refractor type inserts of all top 60 kind of guys. And so that was a new branch that I grew. It sort of fits in with my existing bonsai structure, kind of lays right in there within my top 100, and also has that nostalgic angle for me.
You feel very strongly about the 93 finest refractor set, and you've talked about it a lot, and you've had a big influence on me, where I anticipate eventually caving and getting the Clemens from that set, which I haven't done yet.
Yeah.
Aaron told me recently that he's really strongly considering getting the Nolan Ryan from that set.
That is the Ryan. I mean, in my opinion.
Tell Darren why he should do that as a big Ryan collector.
Well, it's the cream of the crop. It is the creme de la creme of all 90s inserts. It was the first of its kind, the first ever refractor, the first chrome set. It was, and will always be the premium set to come out of relative junk wax, the world of junk wax, and then this set emerges. It was a complete game changer, much like the 52 top set. It was never anything like it before it existed, and I think because of that, it'll always hold a special place in hobby history. And yeah, if you're going to start anywhere as a Clemens collector or a Ryan collector, I mean, that would be the one. That if you're going to start anywhere, that would be the creme de la creme of all refractors, in my opinion. Yeah,
I would say, and it works for me too, because I keep all my Ryans. I only do playing days. Mm-hmm. So 93 works.
Yeah.
Just made the cut, but it works.
Yep.
I will say, unfortunately, though, the Ryan it's the priciest card in the entire set, even outpacing Griffey, which is, this saying something.
Yeah, I was looking at one last month actually, and ended up not going with it because there was a couple other vintage cards that I wanted, but that one is definitely
the interesting thing about the Ryan too is, unless I'm incorrect, I believe that's his only true playing days refractor. That's one of the reasons I picked up the George Brett. I chose to buy the George Brett. Same deal. It was at the very end of his career, and it's his only playing days refractor. Literally, George Brett's only refractor during his playing days is the 93 finest, much like the Ryan. His only playing days refractor. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now Darren is.
I'm sold.
Darren is very patient with me because he knows how I work. He's the color commentator, and I'm the play-by-play guy, and I have no patience, and so he always lets me just kind of, steer the direction of these conversations, and I get so excited to talk to everybody. And you guys are two guys that I've been wanting to talk to for a long time. Al, I got to talk to once. Brian, I I don't even know if you remember, but we briefly met at the entrance of the YouTube get together at the National. We said hello. I think we shook hands, and that was about the extent of it. And so I've been looking forward to picking your brain a little bit. Darren, is there something that what is there anything you want to ask that I haven't asked that I'm just completely dominating on this whole thing?
No, actually, I did have a question, and it's not necessarily because I'm looking to pick up more autographs, but I think this is a good question for people that collect autographs in general. And you know, I think Al does great with. I mean, he has some incredible autographs. You buy some autographs raw, right? You ride ungraded. How, if somebody's getting into autograph collecting, especially vintage autograph collecting, even like really old stuff, right? Because I believe your Cy Young you bought raw, right?
Yep.
How are you comfortable spending that kind of money? Like, what do you do to, I guess, let me rephrase, what do you do to become comfortable spending that kind of money on ungraded autographs? And I'm not saying that if something's graded, it guarantees that it's authentic, but it's more likely to be. So I'm curious, like, obviously when you started buying your Cobb, that was before grading, or right when grading started, right? But I guess advice to people in general that are looking to buy old autographs, how do you become comfortable purchasing ungraded ones? Because when I look online, for example, there's a few players that I'm considering picking up an autograph where looks like there's a bunch of available autographs that are ungraded, and they're not considerably less expensive than the graded, but they're, you know, hundreds of dollars, in some cases like $1,000 less than the graded ones. What do you do to make yourself comfortable doing that?
Yeah, I would never buy an autograph on the level of Cy Young without it being certified. So when I bought that, it was not slabbed, but it was dual certified, PSA DNA and JSA. So there were two COAs with it. It had the JSA sticker on the back, and it also had a PSA DNA certification with it. So it was coming from a very reputable dealer at the National who deals exclusively in high-end autographs. So I trusted the dealer. And it was dual certified with JSA and PSA DNA already certified, even though it wasn't slabbed. It had the paperwork with it, you know, two LOAs with it. And so I was pretty confident. And the price that I was getting it for, I mean, would I have preferred to buy it slabbed? Sure. But, you know, an autograph that I paid, you know, $2,500 for is now worth $5,000 as it sits. So I was able to add value, and that's something I try to do when I can pick up a certified autograph. It's JSA or PSA DNA certified, just happens to not be slabbed yet. That's typically what I try to do. It's a beautiful looking autograph. It may be one that I feel will grade high, maybe a 9 or a 10, because that's another way you can add value. For a $25 autograph grading fee, you add that 9 or 10 premium to it, and you slab it. You can really sometimes double the price of an autograph. You know, if all you have to do is they're slabbing it. They didn't even charge me for authentication on the Cy Young because it was already authenticated by them.
That makes sense.
They actually refunded the authentication fee because they said, oh, you already have a PSA cert with this, so we're not going to charge you for authentication again because it's already been certified by us. So they only charged me to basically slab it and grade it.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, I think there's minimal risk as long as you're comfortable with who you're buying it from, whether it's a reputable seller on eBay with a good feedback rating, it's been on for a while, and it's already been certified by JSA or PSA or Beckett. If you already have some intel telling you this is a legit autograph, I wouldn't just go and buy some random uncertified autograph at that price level. Okay.
So you're not actually going and like pulling up like hey, this is what a Cy Young autograph looks like, and, you know, doing a.
Not. I mean, it's just too murky. It really is. You know, I've made mistakes in the past. You know, I bought a fake Walter Johnson back in high school, and you know, it was like one of these things. It was too close. It was too good to be true. You know, and you just chalk that up to learn my lesson. And
with you, I bought a fake 33 Gaddy Malot at the first card show I went to when I got back into collecting.
You make those mistakes, and then you realize pretty quickly that if it's too good to be true, then it probably is. And sure, you can add value with slabbing and grading an autograph, but you're not going to pick up a Walter Johnson autograph for $200.
Right. Yeah, totally. Okay. That makes sense, because I see a lot of them. I mean, that look good, and they are, because there's a lot of weird COAs out there too.
Yeah. And they're as good
You're
as
like, I've never heard of this. Like,
yeah,
Jim Bob's autograph authentication. I promise it's real. And you're like,
anybody could type one of those up. So
right. Okay. So JSA, PSA, and Beckett. Okay. Yep. I appreciate that. And for anybody that's looking to get into autographs, there you go. Now you know.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you guys, I mean, I didn't ask you guys to bring any things you wanted to talk about with us, but is there anything you guys wanted to throw out there before we call it good? I hope at some point you guys have me or us on your channel. I love talking with you guys, but I also know that we're closing in on the hour mark, and that is sort of like the line in the sand for some people. Not that matters, but is there anything you guys wanted to bring up or talk about or ask before we go? Yeah.
There was one thing that, you mentioned your dad really got back in and started collecting that 60 Topps Yankee set. And that's kind of interesting to me, because that was the year they lost the World Series to the Pirates.
Oh,
so I just thought that would be an odd year.
Oh, that's dirty.
To collect the
that's
60
funny.
Topps. I mean, that's the only thing that came to my mind. I was like, why that year? Because that was a great year for the Pirates.
What's funny? My dad met Theo at the National, and Theo asked him. That was the first question he asked him.
Oh, really?
An exact thing. Yeah.
That's fun.
Well, I'll answer that. My dad collected 58, 59, 60, and then 61, I think. And so when he was looking, he wanted to collect the sets and the cards that he remembered the images of.
Okay.
And so he started with the Yankee team set. And then when he finished that, he's like, wait, I had fun with this. Now what? So then he did the whole 1960 set. And then he got done with that. And he was like, well, this is over. So then he went to the 59 set. So at one point he had a 1960 set with a PSA average over 8.
Wow. That's
So
crazy.
he had it over 8. And at one point he had a Mantle in a 9.
Ooh.
And he had a McCovey in a 9.
Nice.
So, yeah. But, so how about you? Do you have any digs for us, Brian?
Well, I was just talking about autographs and autograph authentication. It's funny because I literally today just got a Beckett autograph authentication order back in the mail today, and
nice.
so I'm in the process of making that video and filming outros and things like that. But just for Darren, I got to show this one that came back in there. But I got a nice, beautiful Nolan Ryan diamond. Nice. This is an all-time Diamond Kings from 2001, and so it's just a really fun one.
Love it.
Got slabbed up, and it's funny as I'm collecting that particular branch of my bonsai tree. I do buy a lot of the autographs just with no certification whatsoever. But then again, it's a smaller, my opinion on that is kind of like, I will look at authentic ones, exemplars, and just see sort of how they match. But also it's not like the caliber of a Walter Johnson or a Cy Young. I mean, this is a little bit different. I think there becomes a tier of player where I would not be comfortable doing that. Yeah. And Nolan Ryan is right about at that threshold where anyone more significant than that, with more value, someone like a Griffey or a Jeter or a Bonds, I absolutely would not. I would not go for any of those without knowing that it's either been authenticated, certified, pack pulled, something like that.
Makes sense. So it's like I've got like 4 or 5 Maddox autographs, and the way I validate that they're Maddox is if they're completely illegible and I have no idea what it says.
Yeah, that's a pretty good indicator. Yeah. That being said, I've been burned before too. I have a couple of examples of fake Maddoxes that have found their way to my collection over the years, and so that's one of the dangers of it. But
so I'm not going to play. I'm not going to play spoiler. I'll ask you guys. I'll and tell you off camera in a second when we're done here. But Why Beckett for the authentication instead of PSA? And what is your threshold? What is kind of the amount you said, about like a Nolan Ryan? Break that down into dollars for some of us
Absolutely.
on what that means.
Absolutely. So why Beckett? Well, I have a lot of respect for Beckett's service and their professionalism and what they offer, and so I trust them. I think that generally they get it right. Obviously, there's not going to be one that gets 100% accuracy. You're not going to have that. But I trust their judgment when they render a verdict and an opinion. Most of the time, their batting average is way higher than what mine would be, and so I trust them. And same with PSA, same with JSA. I honestly put them all on about equal footing, to be perfectly frank. The reason I went with Beckett this time was because they had a special. They had an encapsulation special of $15. It was a holiday special, $15. They will authenticate and encapsulate your autograph for you. And unlike what PSA would do sometimes, where they just say like trading card on the top, Beckett will actually put the actual card title, the set name on the flip for you. And so they had a promo, it was like Holiday 24, where you just did this, and they would encapsulate any autograph card as long as the authentication fee was under $50. And so most of the players I had been sort of amassing, I'll pick one up here and there, but I had 10 cards, that I sent in, and most of their authentication fees are somewhere in the $25, $30 range, but that's still 40-50% off. And so it was a great deal. And so it was an opportunity. And I sort of, keep an ear to the ground just to listen out for, occasionally PSA has those kind of deals too. But Beckett just had one before they did. So I went with them. I'm slab gnostic, so I don't really care what slab they look like or what they're in. It's fine. I cover up the grades anyway with stickers. So, I don't care.
I like how you do that. I've noticed that on your videos that you cover those up. And I keep saying, I think if somebody were to come out with, and maybe I should talk to the penny sleever about this, but whether they be graded card sleeves or something like, what do they call the whole thing that your slab goes in and the
slab mag,
the slab mag that covers that portion, like it leaves a window for what the card is, but it covers the grade portion. Because when you show an old card to somebody and it says authentic or it says a 1.5, and they're like, that's what the person sees, and they don't know that is still very special. They just see the 1.5, and it's like, I think if people had that option, I know I would probably buy a few, because I don't want that to be shown sometimes. But back to follow up on that. So what is your threshold for buying a raw autograph? Where is your cover? And I know for everybody's budget, for some people, a $25 autograph is probably their threshold. But for you, what is it?
It depends. So the highest I've ever really gone, I think, is I think, well, it's interesting because the ones that have gone above this amount have had something else going for them that to me made them safer than just unauthenticated. And so, for example, this Nolan Ryan that I just showed. So this is a card that I purchased thinking that it was a pack pulled certified autograph. And the reason why was because they actually had them in this set. The issue was that it was only a studio series parallel of this that was numbered to 250 instead of the 2500 that's on the back here. And so it's only the first 50. Now the serial number is under 50. And so because the serial number was under 50, I thought this was a pack pulled one, but it should in fact have a canvas cardstock, and it should have an embossed stamp in there as well if it were pack pulled and certified. So I got it for what I thought was a fantastic price, considering I thought it was pack pulled certified. And then I bought it later and realized, well, it's not, but it still looks pretty good. I'm going to send it off and sort of get it. I'm going to legitimize this one. Let's get it an actual holder. Let's get it certified. And so I think I paid about like $75 for that. think the highest I've ever spent on one that had no certification whatsoever, I think was about 60. I think is about what I've, done. And there was another one, which is, I mean, to spoil the next video I'm about to put out here about my Beckett return. I'm happy to say that basically all of them came back as authentic,
Nice.
except for one that I suspected might not come back authentic. And because this one had been in one of those sort of no name, it was a CAS card saver with a little sticker over top sealing it. And I don't know what CAS is or what that is. Still is technically an active cert on it. And so it was a Mike Schmidt that Beckett had rejected. And they, in fact, rejected it again. But the funny part about this is I just today submitted this. This is another topic for talking about. So there's a Facebook group called Outer Safe. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but what you can do is basically it's like a quick opinion. So PSA and Beckett, they offer a quick opinion where for $10 you can just take a picture of something, send it away, and they'll just give you their quick opinion on yes, it's good, it's not good, and it's actually a really good service if you're looking into getting something. You'll want to spend $100-$150 on an autograph that might not be good. You'll have an expert actually take a look at it and give you their opinion. And so this is if it's an auction that's going on and it doesn't end for a couple of days, they give you an opinion back in usually within 24 hours they'll get it right back to you. So there's a Facebook group called Outer Safe that does the exact same thing. They have an entire panel of about 6 to 8 really, really good experts that are on there that know their stuff. They just do baseball. And just for grins, I sent them a picture of my Mike Schmidt card. They said it was safe. So interesting. So here's my Mike Schmidt that Beckett said was no good. In fact, they said twice it was no good. But according to Outer Safe,
say I got a Schmidt that's
today,
JSA. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
The problem with a guy like Schmidt is that he had a number of when he would sign through the mail. If you look at TTMs from the 80s, early 90s, a number of those I believe were ghost signed, and were actually pretty good. But so I think that's the danger, I think, in getting one that looks good, is that the ghost signers were actually quite good with that. So
I mean, yours looks pretty close to that.
Yeah, I would say so. And again, I got it. It was already in a weird off-brand slab, but it looks about right. I mean, that's it's not and I don't know. No one signs the exact same autograph every single time anyway.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when I sign credit card receipts,
Perfect sign. So what are you gonna do? But to me, it looked right. It passed the smell test anyway, and I was looking for this card. I was looking for a Mike Schmidt signed Diamond King. There you go. There you go. Perfect. There you go. So, right.
He's one of those guys on the border, like Nolan Ryan. Like
he's right on the border. So,
right.
So
you conceivably run into a Schmidt forged autograph, but you're not going to run into a fake Paul Molitor. You're just not,
Yeah. Right. Ryan Sandberg. Really? I mean,
yeah.
Mike Messina. I mean, a lot of these guys are so good about TTMing. It's like, why would you ever? It doesn't make financial sense to even want to try to forge a guy, like that. And
right.
so it's really the guys that you'd be more careful about, that you do want to, like Barry Bonds. Like there's some awful, terrible fake Barry Bonds autographs on eBay. Like, my God, it's the Wild West out there. And so be careful. Just don't mess around. Derek Jeter, don't even mess around with it. So many of the fakes do actually look pretty good. Those are the scary ones. So I would just say, just be careful. Do your due diligence.
Yeah, Jeter's a tough one. I think I've got 3 Jeters, and I think all of them are certified from Steiner.
He had exclusive rights with Steiner for years.
Yeah,
I have 3 or 4 Jeters, but I saw him sign them all.
There you go.
I know they're real. Yeah. Well, guys, this was honestly really, really fun.
Yeah, guys, this is a blast.
We'll have to do we'll have to do a mashup like this again sometime.
For sure.
I really enjoyed this, and I appreciate you guys making time for us, and you guys were fantastic guests. I love the philosophical way that you guys look at things. Again, Iconic Baseball, Iconic Al, subscribe. Brian, the High Pop Professor, subscribe. I I look forward to both of their channel videos all the time, and I really like when you guys do your pair ups. Those are my favorites, if I'm being honest. But I watch all your guys' stuff, both of you. So and I don't just say that. So thanks again, guys. Darren, anything you want to say before we sign off here?
Yeah, thanks for coming on, guys. Really appreciate it. And Al, Janelle told me to tell you that we're going to a Rockies game this year.
Oh yeah, we will.
I think that man, she'd like you to come too.
Nice invite. I appreciate that. So I don't feel left
Yeah,
out.
Greg, next time you're in Denver, let us know and we'll get Rockies tickets.
Yep.
Same with you,
I've
Brian.
actually been to Denver like 3 times, but
let us know.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I've only seen you once, and there wasn't a Rockies game when you came. So,
well, 2 of the times I was there was before I knew you, which
what
was
kind of
like
that's a terrible excuse.
15 months ago. It seems like I've known you since I was 8, and it was like
Right.
15 months ago. All right, guys. Thanks again. Go subscribe to these channels. Thanks for coming on, guys.
Greg, I'll put the link below.
Thank you.